Hi everyone, this is Rain Mendoza, and today we're going to talk about lesson 4, how to end your story, which is your conclusion. So during the first lesson, we talked about the basics of storytelling. Second lesson, we talked about your introduction, which is your first liner, which is supposed to draw your audience into your story. Third lesson, we talked about supporting paragraphs, which will be the meat of your story. And then today we're gonna do the conclusion, which is the ending. How to end your story in a compelling manner so it has the same effect as when you wrote your first liner, so that your audience will be drawn in, read your story, and then when they get to the bottom of your story, it's so compelling that your audience will not forget what has happened in the story. So how do you end your story? From the introduction all the way to the end of the story, the character has already changed. So when you write your ending, you have to make sure that your audience remembers how you started the story. You have to bring your audience back so they remember, sort of. There are different ways to end a story, and there's no one specific way to do it. You can end it like the way fairy tales end, like they live happily ever after. That's an option. But I don't usually do that with my own stories. What I do is I summarize everything that my audience may have forgotten as they read through the story. So I would bring my audience back to the purpose of my main character's journey, and then I remind my audience what we set out to do from the beginning, or what the purpose of the story was. And my own stories, what I do is I have one last setting or one last event in the story, which summarizes everything that has happened throughout the story, and I remind my audience how the conflict has been resolved and how my character has changed perceptions when the story began, all throughout the journey until the very end. How my main character's beliefs have been transformed, just so my audience will have a sense of contentment, that whatever it was that they had been craving for while reading my story has been satisfied. And so those are the ways that you can end your story. Make sure that the audience understands that the conflict has been resolved, that the main character's purpose or the goal has been accomplished, and what the lesson has been for the main character that you want also for your audience to learn or understand. So those are the things. Make sure that you did not leave any stones unturned, unless you are wanting for your audience to have different interpretations, or you're allowing them to think for themselves, not you giving them the ending. You're letting your audience think for themselves how they want to end your story. So you can do it like that. Also, if you're planning to have a part 2, part 3, part 4, you always have to make sure that your ending has a promise of what the audience can expect in the next story or in your next installment, if you're doing a series or a longer story. Okay, let me make my novel or my book an example. When I ended the story, everything has been resolved. All the conflicts, all the mysteries, the questions that my audience had, that I expected they would have while they're reading the story, all of those were answered by the time I reached the ending. But when I wrote the ending, it didn't really mean that everything has ended. Like the journey of the character has not ended when the story ended. It's going to continue, but it's up to the audience to imagine what the next story will be. So that's how I ended it. I gave my audience an opportunity to imagine what could happen after my ending. So they could still continue the story in their heads, on their minds, even though the book has already ended. So that's how I ended my story, and that's how you can end your story too. You can still tickle your audience's imagination by writing something that will make them think that was that really the end, or is there a continuation, or create a bit of excitement for the audience to want some more. That's it. We're gonna do the last lesson week. I'm going to record that, and what I'm planning to do is I'm going to share with you a story, a very short story that I wrote. We're going to read a story that I wrote so that you can have an example of a short story, and you can get a bit of inspiration from that story so you can write your own, and then you're good to go. So before we all head out, I just want to tell you guys that I do have a store. It's called Miss Fabulous. It's an online store, and I do sell some very, very cute stuff that you need to check out. www.missfabulous.com.